It all began the night of my father's 60th birthday party. The kind of celebration only a man like him could host. Grandiose, pompous, overflowing with champagne and tension. I stood near the back of the hall watching the glittering crowd. Mix and chatter, their laughter loud and hollow like the echo of an empty promise. My father, William Hargrove, billionaire tycoon, real estate mogul, and a man who saw emotions as liabilities, was holding court at the center of the room. He'd always said there were only two kinds of people in this world, those who build empires and those who sweep their floors. I had once tried to be the former under his gaze, seeking his approval like a plant leaning toward sunlight that never truly warmed it. But tonight, everything unraveled. The moment came like a storm. I'd been tracking for years. He made a toast, and in front of hundreds said I was the family's disappointment. The investment that never matured, the dead weight he'd carried for too long. My fists clenched, my throat burned. But I didn't interrupt. I just walked up, calm and cold, and told him I'd never wanted his empire. I had built my own and he would find out soon enough. He sneered, red in the face, veins bulging, and screamed, "You're dead to me." Everyone gasped, but I didn't. I turned around and walked out without another word. That was the last moment I'd ever begged for his respect, because 24 hours later, the world would know what I'd become on my own terms. Away from his shadow and scorn, the night air outside the mansion was thick with whispers and pitying stares. But I didn't care. I got into my car, a simple black SUV that didn't scream wealth, and drove off into the night. Every mile away from my father's estate felt like shedding chains. I headed straight for the hotel I had quietly checked into earlier that week. Under an alias, I had anticipated something like this. Years of being dismissed, insulted. Compared to my siblings who towed his line, had made me plan for a moment like this not just emotionally, but strategically. I had something he didn't know about, not just success. I had built a tech startup in secret over the last 5 years, one that recently got bought out for nearly $500 million by one of Silicon Valley's biggest players. I'd lived frugally, kept a low profile, and used a shell company to buy a property in Malibu no one knew about. The estate sat on 12 acres of private cliffside, with gates that kept the world at bay. The sale had closed 3 days ago, and tomorrow those gates would open for the first time with me holding the keys. My father had no idea what I'd done. To him, I was still the failed artist, the child who refused to join the family business. But in less than 24 hours, the media would catch wind of the sale. My name would be in headlines, and William Hargrove would learn that the child he'd disowned had built a kingdom of their own. The morning sun rose like a spotlight over Los Angeles, casting a golden hue over the coastline. I was already awake, dressed in tailored casuals and sipping espresso on the hotel balcony as the news began to trickle in. The property purchase had hit the real estate wires and headlines began to sprout like wildfire. Mystery buyer snags. $30 million Malibu megastate underdog tech founder behind massive private buy. And then, finally, William Hargrove's estranged child emerges as billion-dollar visionary. I watched as my phone blew up messages from journalists, former friends, even exes who'd written me off as a lost cause. But the only message I opened was from my assistant. Cars ready. Security's in place. Gates will open in 20 minutes. I smiled, not with arrogance, but with vindication. It wasn't just about the house. It was what the house represented. Independence, vision, defiance of every limit he tried to place on me. As I drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, memories flooded in being yelled at for painting instead of studying business. Being grounded for refusing to attend his networking dinners. Being told I'd never make it unless I played by his rules. I remembered the night I moved out with nothing but a duffel bag and a dream, vowing to never return until I had something worth returning for. That day had come. The gates of the estate loomed large and silent as I approached. 2 tall security guards nodded as the biometric scanner confirmed my identity. With a smooth mechanical hum, the iron gates opened, revealing the masterpiece beyond. A winding driveway snaked through manicured lawns, past a glass-walled guest house, a meditation pavilion, and finally, the main mansion perched like a jewel on the edge of the cliff. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the ocean. The place wasn't just luxury, it was art. Designed by the same architect behind Elon Musk's private retreat, the estate was equal parts technology and tranquility. As I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front entrance, I could feel the old version of myself shedding away like dead skin. The girl who once wept in her bedroom after being called a disgrace now stood taller, stronger, a silent storm. Inside, a team of staff was already at work, interior designers, tech installers, a private chef preparing lunch. But I needed a moment alone. I walked through the marble foyer, past the grand staircase, and into the study, where a floor-to-ceiling window offered a view of the sea that felt infinite. I sat down, not on a throne, but on a simple leather chair, opened my laptop, and began typing, not emails. A letter. To my father, it wasn't bitter. It wasn't vengeful. It simply stated the truth. You taught me everything I never wanted to be, and that's what made me who I am today. The next few hours were a blur of movement and energy. Florists delivered arrangements for the housewarming. My legal team arrived to finalize media release permissions. Photographers prepared for a feature with Architectural Digest. I wasn't doing this for show, but I knew the world would look, so I would let them see what self-built success truly looked like. I received a call from my former mentor, the one who had believed in my ideas back when they were scribbled in sketchbooks. "I always knew you'd do it your way," she said. That meant more than all the headlines. But then, just as I was preparing to step outside for the first official walkthrough of the grounds, my assistant approached me. "Your father's on the line," she said quietly. My heart thudded. I hadn't spoken to him since the outburst. I took the call. He didn't start with hello. He started with, "I saw the news, so it's true." His voice was hard, almost bitter, but beneath it something cracked. "You did all this? Without me?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Yes, and in spite of you." There was silence. A long one. Then he whispered, "You really bought that estate?" I could almost see his face, the disbelief, the realization that he had underestimated me all his life. "Yes," I said. "And this time I didn't need your blessing." Then I hung up. I stood still for a few moments after hanging up, letting the weight of that final sentence settle into my bones. "I didn't need your blessing." It echoed louder than his scream from the night before. For years I had craved his approval like oxygen, but in this moment I realized I had learned to breathe without it. I turned and walked through the sun-drenched corridors, each step echoing with the sound of my own reclamation. Outside, the breeze carried the scent of salt and eucalyptus. I walked down the stone pathway that led to the edge of the property where an infinity pool mirrored the ocean's endless expanse. I stood there, my reflection distorted slightly by the ripples. My past self would have marveled at this moment. The view, the victory, the validation, but I felt calm. Not triumphant, not boastful, just whole. For the first time, I was standing in a place that was truly mine. Not borrowed, not inherited, not forced upon me. I watched as a black SUV approached the gates far in the distance. My assistant had said there would be some media coming in for controlled shots, but something told me this wasn't them. I narrowed my eyes as the car stopped before the security checkpoint. The guard leaned down, spoke to the driver, and then walked to the house. A minute later, he arrived by my side. "Ms. Hargrove," he said, "there's a man at the gate, says he's your father. Should I send him away?" My stomach twisted, not with fear, but with the final remnants of childhood confusion. I took a breath. "Let him in," I said. The SUV pulled up slowly, deliberately. My father stepped out, not in one of his tailored suits, but in a windbreaker and jeans. It was the most unguarded I'd ever seen him, but his eyes still held that glint of authority. He didn't look around, didn't marvel at the property. He just walked toward me with that same purposeful gait he'd used in boardrooms for decades. I stayed rooted where I stood, arms crossed loosely, expression unreadable. We faced each other in silence for a moment, the ocean whispering behind us. Then he spoke. "This is quite a place," he said, almost like a challenge. I nodded. It is another pause. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I laughed. One sharp, humorless. "Tell you. You made it clear. I was dead to you." He winced slightly but didn't argue. "You really built all this from nothing?" I tilted my head. "No. I built it from being treated like nothing." He didn't flinch this time, just looked away for a second, then back. "I didn't think you had this in you," he admitted. "I know," I said softly. "That's the problem. You never did." He nodded slowly, looking out at the view. "I came here today thinking I'd try to reclaim you somehow. That maybe you'd forgive me." I blinked. "That wasn't what I expected. Forgiveness isn't what I'm looking for," I said. "Understanding might be a better start." He followed me as I turned and walked toward the patio, where 2 lounge chairs faced the sea. We sat down, the silence between us thick but not entirely hostile anymore. He looked around the estate, then down at his hands. "When your mother died, I didn't know how to raise you. I only knew how to shape people into business assets. That's all I understood." I felt my jaw tighten. "You didn't raise me?" He didn't deny it. I thought, "If I made you tough, you'd survive the world. But maybe I was just pushing you away so I wouldn't have to feel too much." That admission caught me off guard. I looked at him really, looked at him for the first time in years. He wasn't the towering, invincible mogul anymore. He was just a man, older, worn, and perhaps regretting the sharpness he'd used to shield himself from softness. I spent years building something you couldn't belittle, I said. But I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to escape you. He nodded. You did more than escape. You surpassed everything I thought possible. I sat back in my chair. That's the saddest part, Dad. You never told me you were proud of me until I bought a mansion. He sighed deeply. I didn't know how to say it when you needed it most. I stared out at the ocean. That's the thing about words left unsaid. They harden people. He didn't reply. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to defend. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun inch lower in the sky. The Malibu waves crashed rhythmically against the cliffs, indifferent to our quiet reckoning. Eventually, my father stood and walked toward the edge, peering over the railing. You know, he said, I used to dream of retiring by the sea, buying a place like this, but I never did. Always too busy chasing the next deal. I joined him at the edge, shoulder to shoulder, but worlds apart in some ways. And now? I asked. He chuckled bitterly. Now I realize I never chased peace. I chased power. He turned to me. And you? What are you chasing? I thought for a moment. Wholeness, freedom, and maybe a little peace. He nodded, slowly, thoughtfully. You found it. I can see that. For the first time, there was no competition in his voice. No condescension, just truth. He extended a hand, hesitated, then dropped it. I don't expect a relationship overnight, but if there's ever a crack in the wall you've built between us, I'd like to be there. I looked at him and saw a flicker of vulnerability I had never seen. I don't know yet, I said, but I appreciate that you showed up. He gave a slight nod, then turned and walked back to his car. I watched as the gates opened again and swallowed the man who had once ruled my world, and I felt lighter the next day. Headlines exploded again, not about the estate, but about the reunion. Estranged billionaire father visits daughter at Malibu estate. The news blared. Paparazzi hovered like flies. Drones buzzed overhead, and speculation spun wildly. But I stayed inside, refusing interviews. This wasn't for them. This was for me. I spent the day walking the property, touching the walls, testing the acoustics in the studio I'd had built for myself. Sitting under the olive tree I'd had flown in from Tuscany. Every inch of the place reflected a part of me, the parts my father tried to erase. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, not of stock reports but of novels, philosophy, and poetry. There was a meditation room where silence reigned, not strategy. A kitchen with no staff, just the aroma of real cooking. Done by me, for me. The estate wasn't a trophy. It was a declaration, and I wasn't just its owner. I was its creator. That night I sat under the stars, wrapped in a shawl, drinking tea and thinking about legacy. My father's legacy was concrete and glass, towers that bore his name. Mine would be different. I'd invest in people, in art, in community. I'd teach others that being told you're dead to me doesn't end the story. Sometimes it begins the most powerful chapter of all. Weeks passed. The buzz died down. My father didn't call again, but I heard from one of my old family staff members that he'd started therapy, that he'd begun donating quietly to arts programs. He used to scoff at that. He sometimes just sat in his empty mansion, staring out windows that never faced the sea. I didn't rejoice in that. I didn't want revenge. I wanted growth, his mine, everyone's. I took a meeting with a group of young entrepreneurs in downtown LA, mentoring them on building something from nothing, staying grounded, staying kind. I told them the truth. I wasn't born to a cruel man. I was born to a broken one, and broken people often break others without meaning to. One girl cried. One boy said he wanted to call his estranged mom, and I felt something shift again. This was my purpose now, not to prove myself, but to lift others. My Malibu estate became more than a home. It became a sanctuary for creativity, for healing, for community. I hosted retreats, art showcases, quiet conversations between people who once thought they were alone, and every time I opened those gates to welcome them in, I remembered what it felt like to stand on the other side, waiting for someone to believe. In me now, years later, I stand on the same cliff, barefoot, wind tangling my hair, watching the sun set behind the sea. The house behind me is no longer just a monument to my rise, it's become a living thing. Laughter echoes through its halls. Music plays late into the night, and the walls are covered not in paintings of power, but of passion. My father visits sometimes. We don't talk about the past much anymore. We sit quietly watching the waves, drinking coffee, sharing silence. That's our peace. I don't need him to say he's proud. I've long since become proud enough of myself. What he thinks doesn't define me anymore. What I've built, who I've become, and who I've helped, those are my measures. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone standing where I once stood, it's this. You are not the names they call you. You are not the roles they assign you. You are the fire you keep lit inside even when they try to smother it. You are the builder of your own gate sand. One day, you will hold the keys. And when you do, open them wide. Walk through with your head high, because the life they never believed you could have is already waiting for you.